CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Welcome to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs, and business consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. A little bit later in the podcast, we are going to get to Joe Andreessen and his rookie card, which is a pretty cool story I had a chance to write this week for The Athletic. And I have the video. It was set up by the Bills PR staff. Kevin Kearns deserves a lot of credit for making that happen, because Joe was not at the facility at the time when I learned about the card and had it, the images to share with him. And so Kevin Kearns from Bills PR got us on a video call so that way we could reveal the card to him that way. And it worked out pretty well. And it was going to be in the story at The Athletic, but I think the video quality or something maybe wasn't up to snuff. But I have it, and we're going to show it a little bit later, and you can actually watch the Lancaster High UB alum get a glimpse of his first football card. And the thing that's cool about it too is he is a collector, so this is a big deal to him. I think some people might be like, "Yeah, what's the big deal? It's a football card," but it's a part of Americana. And what, I don't know, we didn't talk about this yet, Jonah. Your thoughts on being on a football card? Is that a big deal or not in general?
Well, I've never been on a football card, so yeah, I guess it is a big deal.
I mean, do you think it's a cool thing? I think some people are too cool for school. Like a lot of athletes, I think, would probably say, yeah, big deal, flip it into their back of their locker and not think much of it. And then there are some who would look at it as a rite of passage, almost as a sign that you made it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it has to do with who you are as an NFL player and your backstory. Joe Andreessen, playing for his hometown team that had to get signed out of rookie camp and didn't necessarily know he was going to be an NFL player throughout his college career, is a lot different than someone drafted in the first round that maybe has been on something similar to a trading card in college or has had his photo printed on posters or things like that before. So I think maybe it says a lot more about who you are and your place in the NFL by how excited you get about being on the card. And as you mentioned, if Joe being a card collector probably adds to the allure for someone like that. And a lot of these athletes look at cards as, items that they have to sign, not necessarily memorabilia that they are wishing to collect. But I would also think that every NFL player probably likes seeing their first card. It sort of cements their arrival in the league, and maybe they get cynical about it after that rookie card, as they get further along.
Yeah, two great points you make there. If you're a first-round pick or you're projected, you a Power 5 school at a skill position, especially quarterback, but receiver, running back, tight end, you probably have had cards made of you before you've reached the NFL. You don't even have your NFL team yet, and you got 5 or 6 cards maybe have been made of you either by your school or one of the major companies about you being a prospect and that type of thing. Joe Andreessen wasn't going to get that coming out of UB and Bryant as a linebacker. But the other thing too, that I think, maybe it's worth a follow-up story. I would suspect that the Bills locker room is full of guys who do appreciate being on a football card because of their backstories. The Bills roster is full of dudes who weren't supposed to, I don't want to say weren't supposed to make it, but weren't recruited. Josh Allen, most famously, but Deion Dawkins and Khalil Shakir, and there are a bunch of guys on that team, not like Amari Cooper or not like a Keon Coleman, guys who, were a big deal when they were in high school, highly recruited, the whole thing. They were on a bunch of cards, but there's probably some on that team who just don't take it for granted and I'm talking about stars on the Bills roster who would not take it for granted that this is a pretty cool thing. Dalton Kincaid with his story of not playing much football and then kind of coming out of nowhere late at San Diego University and then at Utah. I don't know,
But I
maybe some
find it
others come to mind
interesting.
for you. I mean,
I
James
find it
Cook, it's
interesting.
probably not as big of a deal to James Cook, whose brother was in the NFL and who had his path a little bit, his runway was a lot longer and wider than some of these other guys. Um,
Well,
anyways,
I wonder, in context of this, but with any player in any sport, really, um, what the allure is of being on a football card. I find it interesting that football cards still matter, well, baseball cards as well, as much as they do in this digital world when there's NFTs and other ways that athletes get celebrated in the digital sphere. That it would seem like athletes maybe don't appreciate being on a card as much because being on a card wouldn't mean as much as it used to. But I'm not involved in the hobby as much as you are and haven't written about it over the years as much as you have. So I find it interesting that cards still matter in the way that they do. Maybe they don't matter as much, but still matter a lot.
I'd say there's a tangible aspect to it, Jonah, in that the digital stuff, I mean, you're not going to hand somebody, you mentioned the autograph, and you'll take a look at it when we show Joe Andreessen's card is awesome for autographs because there's a lot of white on the card. He's in his white jersey, the borders are white, and this is a guy who, again, hasn't had a card. When you want Joe Andreessen's autograph, what are you getting him to sign? Yeah, you might have a photo or something like that, a scrap of paper, a program, something handy, a football maybe, but this is an actual Joe Andreessen item that he can sign. And I do think that some players, like you mentioned, it is the first card, but are like, I'm going to be signing this for the rest of my life. And there's another story I wrote a couple of years ago for The Athletic about Stevie Johnson and his jersey that I happen to have from the infamous drop against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He wore it, and the whole thing. I wrote a story of trying to figure out, why do I even have this? Why did I feel compelled to buy this years and years ago, and then showing it to him and going over it. And he was actually doing a private signing at the time when I met with him. He was in a hotel downtown, and he had a bunch of stuff that he was signing. And one of the cards, and I made it mention, I think it might even been the lead to the column. I could tell that the photo was taken right after the drop because of his haircut. He used to have very unusual haircuts. You can tell by what he's wearing. You can tell by the face paint that he had on and the look of kind of anguish on his face that is the photo that is on the card. And he said, I hate signing this card because it reminds him of the drop. So they do have that element of, I'm going to be presented with this over and over and over again for the rest of my life. So they do kind of judge it. And so the other thing I want to mention real quick, because I didn't talk to Joe Andreessen about it. And when we play the video, I'm just going to let the video roll. So I know I'm doing a long setup here, but that play, it's his big tackle against the Seattle Seahawks is the one. He's coming up and he's flexing after he made the tackle, thundering hit, big hit after the Bills went up 24-3 late in the third quarter out in Seattle. And so it was a play. It signifies a play for him, a specific play. So that's cool for him. But also I went back and watched the play on the broadcast because I was at the game in Seattle, so I didn't get to see it. Typical of an NFL broadcast. It's a kickoff coverage, big hit. You can hear Tom Brady himself go, oh, but they need to get to a clip. They had a vignette that they were going to talk about. Austin Johnson had the interception. And the sideline reporter wanted to mention that it was Austin Johnson's first interception of any kind, not even including high school, including Pee Wee. They didn't talk about Joe Andreessen's hit. They didn't even mention his name on the broadcast. He comes down, he makes what is to date his biggest play in the NFL. The broadcast doesn't even mention his name. It is, let's go down to the sideline for this Austin Johnson anecdote. But Tom Brady obviously was impressed enough, but the production had to leave the game action. No replay. They come back and it's the Seahawks have the ball. So they don't show a replay of Andreessen's hit. They don't mention his name on the broadcast. He has a chance for Tom Brady to talk about him, maybe in the story, and it evaporated in a second, but it's now on this football card forever. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I wanted to put that in my story, and I I guess that slipped before I filed it, but I thought it was kind of interesting that his moment on television was fleeting, but it's going to be on this football card for the rest of his life.
And also a play that he got fined by the NFL for unnecessary roughness. So it's probably something that he's going to be reminded of years later when he's signing this card as an old man.
And it added to it also because Tracy Hackler from Panini America, who's their marketing guy, who I was talking to for this story. So Joe Andreessen sent out a tweet asking to be put on. He was like, "Hey, where's my rookie card at?" And it was kind of tongue in cheek. And guys, just because you're in the NFL doesn't mean you get a card, especially if you're a special teamer and a linebacker, undrafted, all that stuff. Jamarcus Ingram and Cam Lewis don't have football cards yet. They don't have, so they've been around longer than him. 2 UB guys, fringy on the roster. They don't. Jamarcus Ingram, he had that big game. He didn't get anything. So, he asks Panini on Twitter. Panini makes note of it. They started digging around, and part of the story, the charm was not only the Buffalo Joe backstory, but that by the time that he had sent that tweet out and Tracy Hackler from Panini had started looking into, okay, do we want to make a card of Joe Andreessen? Ryan Fitzpatrick had tweeted out about that fine saying, I'm going to pay the fine because this can't happen to Buffalo Joe. Or I think Fitzpatrick called him Mr. Buffalo, and then that was part of the charm where Panini is like, all right, we definitely have to make a card about this guy because he's he's building his own little folklore among Bills fans. And so that fine maybe helped solidify the card being made. How much he would have to charge, I don't know that Joe Andreessen doesn't strike me as a guy who's going to charge for his autograph for a while. I think he might have to stick around for a bit before he starts charging for his autograph, but maybe autograph funding can help make up for that fine. Bills are at the Colts on Sunday. I have been sick, and I don't know if anybody can tell by the sound of my voice. I've been pretty raggedy for the last almost since Seattle. I mean, I didn't go to the game. I didn't go to the Dolphins game. Didn't want to get anybody sick. Not going to Indianapolis. So, but anyways, that game is taking place Sunday afternoon. The Bills are playing really well. They clearly have recaptured whatever lost momentum they had in those back-to-back losses earlier in the season, and that particularly ugly loss to Baltimore. Indianapolis is a team you're supposed to stomp. Joe Flacco at quarterback looked pretty lousy. I know that they put him in there for the steady veteran hand over Anthony Richardson, and he just looked, the Colts, I should say, their offense just looked terrible on Monday night. Or I'm sorry, that was a Sunday night game against the Minnesota Vikings. It was a 21-13 loss. And now here they are getting the Buffalo Bills. The Bills then have a schedule after Indianapolis in which they have the Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers at home, sandwiched around a bye week, and then at Los Angeles, at Detroit, before finishing up with the final game against the Jets and both Patriots games over the last 3 weeks of the regular season. So you raised the point before we even started, Jonah, classic trap game scenario, going on the road to a bad team when you have your the toughest part and biggest test of your schedule right on the horizon, and perhaps a temptation to want to take a deep breath before the slog of December. You've been out there this week. Thoughts on what the guys have been saying in the locker room, what you've been hearing? Obviously, it's they say all the right things. You don't know if it's a trap game really until about 1:45 in the afternoon on Sunday. But what's your thoughts heading into this game?
Well, the Bills themselves are they're not going to acknowledge that, or if they do acknowledge that, it's to counteract it. But it does have the makings of that, coming off a very emotional win and leading into a very important and emotional, they're coming off a rivalry game, but the Chiefs have become almost their new rivalry. So sandwiched in between two rivalry games is this game that seems to mean a lot less. but also has travel involved. And yeah, Indianapolis isn't a very formidable opponent, but they have a veteran, smart quarterback who might not beat himself in the way some other younger quarterbacks do, the way the Bills can exploit that. And the Bills, even with their recent wins and playing well in a lot of facets, are struggling to stop the run. Jonathan Taylor is a good running back. Indianapolis is a team that has ran the ball well against Buffalo in previous meetings. They do have some offensive line injuries. I still think the Bills can win this game, but I think it's going to be more difficult than it looks like on paper because of the schedule, because it's on the road, and because, you know, NFL teams don't play their best football every single week. You don't get 1% better every day and go out there and take care of business. And the Bills have yet to have that game where they're supposed to win, but they don't. They maybe haven't had the game where they're supposed to lose and they win that either. But every season seems to have some of that baked into it. And it just seems like this might be one of the games on the schedule that's harder than it looks.
Yeah, this could be that game. And we always reference the Jacksonville Jaguars game that Urban Meyer was able to beat the Buffalo Bills. And, you know, there's the clunker and it's not just a Bills thing. It's a team. Teams have them. Teams have the clunker. And this would be of all the games remaining. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jonah.
I would just say there was a Colts game at home a couple of years ago. The Colts were maybe a little bit better, but the Bills were supposed to win that game. The Colts ran all over them. That was the game where, you know, Jordan Pyre and Micah Hyde were asked if they were embarrassed about the defense, and that became a little bit of a mini subplot with that team in that season. So this team has been a difficult matchup at times. A lot of things have maybe changed, the coaching staff and a lot of players, but it just feels like a matchup that could give the Bills some problems if they don't go in there and play as focused as they can.
Yeah, it's a great point. That it is the type of team that is made for the upset for the Bills. I mean, the Bills have had trouble with the run, as you mentioned. Just last week, the Miami Dolphins ran all over the place on them. You know, it was an amazing performance that the Bills won that game with as great as the Dolphins played. Tua Tagovailoa was borderline flawless, and the running backs gashed them after a slow start. From the second quarter on, the Bills didn't seem to know what to do with the Dolphins run game. And yet they just hang on, and it's yet another game. And I've been writing about it when I'm healthy enough to write, but I've been writing about this composure that they got this. And that's the thing that struck me the most. The most encouraging thing, if you're a Bills fan, to me should be the way that they come close to losing it. They come with penalties, poor situational awareness, something, a missed kick. We could talk about Tyler Bass and the 61-yarder and the clutchness of that. But I mean, I'm talking about over the last month. There are all kinds of ways that the Bills have been wobbly. But at the end of the game, you look back on it and it's like they had it all along. That's the composure I keep saying. But it's like, yeah, we got this. And they seem to be playing with that kind of assuredness. And I think that against the Dolphins, it obviously, you know, you're not going to bank on Tyler Bass making a 61-yarder, especially when the wind was kind of coming at him. It died down just enough. But going towards that end of the field, it was tricky there. 61 yards with everything he's been through. You can't count on it. I think most of the people in the stadium were assuming overtime at that point. But yeah, they've just been playing with, when you get to the end of the game, it's not like, oh my God, it's not a white knuckler to the point of, man, that was close. It's kind of like, yeah, if we'd have just paid a little more attention, we'd have seen that they kind of had it the whole way. I don't do you.
No, I agree.
With that.
They also needed a gift from Jordan Poyer committing that unnecessary roughness penalty.
Yep.
And, you know, if you're a Dolphins fan, maybe you think that wasn't the greatest call. And Jordan Poyer has expressed that as well. And also,
well, I'll say this, Jonah, I went and watched his post-game news conference. The Dolphins have a YouTube channel in which they show their post-game news conferences. And so you can see the comments. People were saying there was a lot of spy, double agent references. There was a lot of Dolphins. He's washed. No, Dolphins fans were upset at Poyer. I don't think that there was much quibbling about whether or not that was a bad call.
Well, Jordan Poyer expressed that he didn't think it should have been a penalty. But that was
But
the point I was
Dolphins
just gonna
fans,
make.
even they, as pissed off as they may have been, were even it seemed to be in unison, at least on
Yeah.
this, in this setting, in this post game news conference, that they were blaming Poyer for that play.
Yeah. I saw at least one Dolphins fan I know that blamed the ref, but that's always going to happen, even if it's a good call. But yes, your point, Jordan Poyer being a veteran and in that situation should have known not to make such a reckless play towards the ball. He wasn't the main player in coverage on that. But he had a history of doing that a little bit with the Bills, especially the older he got, maybe just a little too aggressive as he lost a step to make the play. But, you don't win or lose a game on one call. The Bills benefited, or the Dolphins benefited from some calls against the Bills in the first half that took the Bills out of the red zone and put them into a bad offensive situation. So I think on balance, it was pretty fair. But the point remains that the Bills were one or two plays away or one or two calls away from either going to overtime or maybe even losing that game. And it took a 61-yarder, the longest kick in team history, by a kicker that has been unreliable. And I think most Bills fans were questioning whether he could make that kick before it went through the uprights.
I don't want to be too much of a curmudgeon here. I did see some headlines, some thoughts regarding the kicking situation has been solved. I'm not there. I don't think that's true. We still have a lot of football left to be played. And if just because he made a 61-yarder to beat the Dolphins does not absolve him of future misses. And he's going to have to keep doing this. Now, I don't mean he's going to have to keep drilling them at a record distance, but he's going to need to make his 40 pluses on a consistent basis for the Bills and for everybody to be in a place where, okay, he's back on track. Just because he made one kick, regardless of how big it was, doesn't mean that this is corrected. This has been solved. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
I think the
As
hope
an
is that
organization,
he solved his confidence issues and whatever was going on between the earlobes on his helmet. And maybe that's not the case, but I think that's what the hope is, that whatever was bothering Tyler Bass, because he was a pretty reliable kicker up until about at some point in the middle of last season. And so hopefully for the Bills fans, making that kick gets Tyler Bass back to what he used to be. And that's probably not the case. He probably, he did miss an extra point and put another one off the uprights. And if he doesn't make that 61-yarder or doesn't get a chance to kick that 61-yarder, the Bills might be signing another practice squad kicker this week. And there's probably a lot of conversations about what's wrong with Tyler Bass. And that one kick did change a lot of the conversation. And maybe it instills confidence in Tyler Bass because it's put so much confidence. The fans have so much confidence in him now off that kick that maybe he has that in himself now, and it's changed the dynamic somewhat.
confidence is huge. And so that could actually go a long way into solving the issue or making sure that it is cemented from now on. We don't know yet, but the one thing that isn't in play that would be, I think, in other markets, let's say in New York or in Dallas, is the media has not been up Tyler Bass's ass about this. I mean, it's not like he has been asked, but I saw him leave the locker room in Seattle and nobody stopped him. I mean, people thought about it, but he kept walking, after he'd had a shaky performance. Or where am I thinking? Yeah, it must have been in Seattle. Maybe it was the Jets. I don't know. The Jets, maybe. But he left the locker room before we were allowed in. And there was like a look on some reporters' faces. Of should we go get him? Should we track him down? And he was kind of let go. Like, it's like, we're not like chasing this guy with our microphones and our cameras on a game to game, even a week to week basis. He has not been, under the gun from a media standpoint. And so in some cases, this would be the kick that alleviates that media pressure, but that hasn't existed for Tyler Bass. So that's just kind of a journalism or a behind the scenes observation that I'm making, is that he's been left alone, I think. And so this kick in some cases would be a salve for any media friction, but that doesn't come into play here. Keon Coleman is out for the Colts game. Michael Pittman is out also on the other side. Otherwise, the Bills look healthy for this game. A couple of guys are questionable, but looks like they're going to have the full roster, which is good. I don't know if that plays into the trap too, though, Jonah, right? I mean, they have had some injuries, guys like Terrell Bernard or Christian Benford or, guys who've missed some time who are important. Khalil Shakir with his ankle injury. I don't know if it's in an athlete's makeup, a professional athlete's makeup to say, all right, let's make sure we get through this game healthy in Indianapolis because of what's coming around the corner with Kansas City and San Francisco. And does that maybe also lend itself to the trap game?
It could be in the Bills' mindset of who's active and who plays, like some of these questionable players. I think the concern with the Bills' injury situation is Keon Coleman being out combined with Amari Cooper being hurt and missing the last game and possibly not playing this game, or even if he plays, being a wrist injury, being less effective. And the cumulative effect of being down 2 wide receivers, and it was a thinner position. Mac Hollins was banged up in practice, not able to practice fully one of the days this week, so he could be playing while he is hurt, and he did very well to fill in for Amari Cooper last week. So I think that's the issue, that the Bills don't have their full complement of weapons on offense. And the injuries occurred a while ago, but the Bills are thin in the defensive line. They signed Jordan Phillips and Quentin Jefferson this week, but bringing them in after having not played earlier in the season. Jordan Phillips has already been on injured reserve once this season. I don't think you can expect a lot out of them, or maybe even anything out of them in the first game they're on the roster. So while the Bills maybe get better against the run as the season goes along, I don't know if you see that reinforcement coming in right away this week.
The fact that they do know Sean McDermott and the system, having played for the Bills before, I think allows them to have the chance to make some contributions in Indianapolis. But you mentioned, I think the bigger concern are the injuries. They've both been banged up. Johnson was unable to get on the field on a regular basis for the New York Jets. He has no starts. I think 5 games, 5 of the 9 games he's played, or whatever it is. And so, yeah, I think it's the injury situation, and passing their physicals was not a fait accompli for these guys. They to make the team, they still needed to pass those physicals, and that was, from what I understand, a significant step. So it's not to your point.
And they're not coming out of training camp into week 1. They haven't probably participated in too many padded practices of late. So just that physicality of being run-stopping defensive tackles might take some weeks for them to ramp up into being effective in those roles.
Buffalo Sabres erupted for 6 goals against the New York Rangers last night, 5 goals on their first 12 shots. Igor Shesterkin came into the game with his .932 save percentage and got knocked out of the game. The Sabres seem to have found something, and benching a couple of players. Matthias Samuelsson and Henri Jokiharju have been healthy scratches for the last couple of games. And while in many cases that influences those players directly, perhaps there's been a chain reaction throughout the dressing room regarding playing a little bit sharper, playing a little bit better, playing a little more committed, playing more of a two-way game, doing all the things because this is a coach who is going to make healthy scratches out of us if he needs to. And those 2 games that those healthy scratches have been sitting in the press box, to use the metaphor. The Sabres have won them both, and they are now 6-7-1. Heading into tomorrow's game against Calgary. Upcoming schedule, pretty soft. Calgary, Montreal, St. Louis, Philly, all teams that are in the bottom 10 of the NHL in the standings. Well, I don't know if in the standings specifically, but in terms of, power rankings or where teams, all that happy horse shit. These are teams that are down there for the Sabres to keep going. Second line woke up last night. Dylan Cousins, his first 5-on-5 goal of the season. Zach Benson scores on a power play. That's his first goal of any kind this season. Everybody, I think, had a point. Every forward had a point.
Yeah. Second time in team history that's happened.
Unbelievable. Talk about confidence. We're talking about Tyler Bass's confidence. Where do you think the Sabres' confidence is right now? after leaving Madison Square Garden with a 6-1 win.
Well, it's got to be high. Just the 2 games they played this week, they've outscored their opponents 11-2. They've gotten great goaltending from UPL. The puck's going into the net. Winning against a really good team. The Rangers won the President's Trophy last year, and they had the 3rd highest point percentage in the league coming into last night's game. One of the best goaltenders in the league, and they chased him from the game in the second period, getting goals from all 4 lines and points from all 12 forwards, and Rasmus Dahlin scoring on basically their first shot of the game. I think it was their first shot of the game. So everything worked, and everything has seemed to work since Lindy Ruff scratched Yogi Haru and Samuelsson, and they haven't lost a game this season when Dennis Gilbert's in the lineup. So a lot of those, they played really physical in that win against the Senators on Tuesday night. I don't know how much that carried over into the Rangers game, but they played really well against the Rangers. At the same time, if you look at the analytics, the expected goals and things like that, the Rangers doubled them up in expected goals last night. All situations combined, and 5-on-5 as well. It was closer.
I think the Sabres had only one more scoring chance than the Rangers.
Yeah, I could look it up here to see exactly what it was. But right, so they didn't have a high volume of shots and weren't dominating the puck possession and the play and things like that. But what they did do was get quality looks and bury them. And the same thing happened against the Senators. But the Senators also had slightly more expected goals in that game. But in the aggregate before that, the Sabres were a team that was a little bit, above 50% in the analytics, but not winning at that rate. So some of that is balancing out and catching up. Didn't go that way in every game. It's not like the Sabres have been the analytically better team in all their losses and the analytically worse team in all their wins. But lately it's played out that way, at least with these 2 wins and a little bit before that. So a lot of it's evening out to the Sabres being not a bad team, but not a perfect team. But they seem to be following Lindy Ruff's message and his style, even in some of the games that they've lost recently. And things seem to be moving in the right direction towards them being a competitive team and a playoff contender. If they're not exactly in playoff position now, or if they're not in playoff position at the end of the season, it seems like they are a team that's not going to fall out of the race and, fall on their face. They're a good team. There's a lot of things to like about the way the top line's playing, Tage Thompson. And when they get good goaltending, they've generally been a good team this season.
How about Dennis Gilbert? He's not quite Buffalo Joe. I mean, local kid. He had a much better pedigree. St. Joe's, Notre Dame. He was actually drafted 3rd round pick, which is, in hockey, that's not, that's probably like 7th rounder in the NFL. But to come to his hometown team, he's 3-0 when he's in the lineup. He also played the first game against the Florida Panthers, but he does bring a jam to his game that the Sabres seem to lack without him. I'm curious if he would view it as worse to be a healthy scratch because he hasn't played much, but to have been a healthy scratch while with the Sabres versus with a different team. Would that be better or worse, do you think? Because there's the aspect of, hey, I'm in Buffalo. I'm playing for the team I rooted for as a kid. I'm playing for Lindy Ruff, the coach I rooted for as a kid. I'm people who I respect and I've been around, and my family has been around, his uncle being the former communications director. All these things, to be in the organization and not playing, would that be easier than not playing for the Calgary Flames or the Chicago Blackhawks? Or would it make it worse because you're on your hometown team and you want to be out there?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him what's worse. I do think he probably understood that he wasn't going to be in the lineup every game this season. He came to a team that needed his style of play, especially in that 3rd pair, but had a lot of defensemen under contract, guys that were number 1 overall picks and other 1st round picks and highly paid players. And there wasn't an obvious hole in the lineup for him to go into. And they kept 8 defensemen coming out of training camp. So there's going to be 2 defensemen sitting in the press box every single night if they don't have injuries. So I think he had to know that he wasn't going to be guaranteed 82 games, and there would probably be stretches of the season where he was healthy scratch. But now, considering that they've lost more games than they've won when he's not playing, and they're 3-0 when he does play, I think maybe it would sting a little more if he's pulled from the lineup because of contracts or hierarchy. And at some point, Samuelsson has to go back in. Maybe Yoki Haru less so, but Samuelsson can't be a healthy scratch and not playing for the rest of the season unless they're going to trade him. But right now they're going to ride with what's working. I do think after they lose a game, you're probably going to see some changes with the defensemen and try to get this style of game from Samuelsson and Jokiharju back in the lineup. But maybe Dennis Gilbert has cemented his role because he's one of the more physical players on the team. He's one of their fighters, and in that third pair as your sixth defenseman, he probably fits that role better than a lot of the other guys they have. I mean, I'd play him in all the home games. Maybe scratch him on the road. I mean, he is the local kid.
I'm curious how Lindy Ruff is going to handle his goaltending situation, because Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has been playing incredibly well during this stretch, and Devin Levi needs action. You know, he's going to need to play. So that's one of the things about Lindy Ruff's career is how he handles his goalies. And of course, he had Dominic Hasek and Ryan Miller, but when he didn't, it was always a bit of a cluster as to how Lindy Ruff was navigating his two goalies, trying to get one hot, trying to keep the other one active, all that type of stuff. Although I'm thinking of the one season right after Hasek left, in which it was Marty Baron was the clear number one, and Bob Asenza was the backup, and Bob had been in the league forever. You didn't need to worry about him getting action. It was the classic veteran goalie who's just there to spell the starter during a tough back-to-back or a rough stretch. But when you have two young goalies like this, and Devin Levi clearly still in his evolution, he does need to get his time.
I would say, I think for now, he's going to ride the hot hand. I mean, UPL has been playing great. And Lindy Ruff said something the other night after they beat the Senators, and this was in response to the question about scratching the defenseman, but he had mentioned that he's been more patient with this team than he's ever been with another team. And I think it hit a point when they lost 3 in a row that Lindy Ruff realizes they need to win, and he needs to coach this team the way he knows how to coach and he knows how to win. And some of that involved changing the lineup and scratching some guys. And I think a lot of that might involve going with the goalie he trusts the most and riding him, at least to get back over 500 and get as many wins as they need now to sort of right the ship. There will be times when they play back-to-backs and Devin Levi gets into the net, and if he plays well, then maybe he becomes the goalie with the hot hand and he gets his chance. But I think I'd be surprised if they go to Devin Levi just for the sake of giving him a game at this point. It would take a bad performance from UPL or a back-to-back situation, I think, before they change the goaltender right now.
Jonah, I know that you wanted to talk about big basketball matchup tomorrow afternoon at the Riley Center. St. Bonaventure is going to visit Canisius, or excuse me, not at the Riley Center, but at Kessler. Bonaventure has won a couple of games, although I think only one of them counts in the standings, right? Beating Alfred doesn't count. But Canisius coming off of its loss to nationally ranked Arizona out in Arizona. And what are we going to learn tomorrow about Bonaventure at Canisius?
Well, it's the first home game for Canisius, the first home game under new coach Jim Christian and with all the new players on that roster. So they did play that game against Arizona, but it was on late at night, and I think you needed ESPN Plus to watch it. So it's really first opportunity for a lot of local people to see Canisius and what they have against a more comparable opponent, even though Bonaventure's been better and should be better. But Canisius won the last time these two teams played at the Kessler Center, and it was a very close game when they played last year at the Riley Center. So this has always been generally a competitive game, the old Little Three rivalry. It's a fun atmosphere to be in because the Bona fans always travel well, and you get this, it's like being in a high school gym where it's two sets of fans cheering back and forth. And no matter what happens, no matter what side of the floor a basket is scored on, there's going to be cheering and there's going to be
heckling. Right. It's charming. It is charming on one level because it's what we have. But in a way, isn't it kind of sad?
Well, I just mean compared with any other Canisius home game.
All right.
Maybe not any other. You get maybe a little bit of that with Niagara, but more so than.
You know what I'm saying, though.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be one of the bigger crowds of the year in one of the smallest arenas in America. But
this is a classic taking what you can get if you're a college basketball fan. It is a great matchup, but that gym is just so depressing. especially when you think of
Sure.
Canisius. Again, I'm going off on a little tangent here, but that little gym, especially with the weight that Canisius had in sports here in Western New York. In fact, if not for Canisius, we might still have a national, the NBA. Canisius flexed its muscle to get the Buffalo Braves to move because they wanted those prime dates down at the Odd. And granted, you did have the Odd back then, but now the Canisius is where it is, the proud program. And I just, there should be more. There should be more. And but anyways, that's a conversation that's been going on for 30 years.
But it's the gym they have, and it's comparable to most of the teams they play in the league, even though it's one of the smallest in the country and it's nothing really to brag about, but it is the level of basketball that Canisius plays at right now. If they were to play this game down at KeyBank Center, it would be 2/3 empty. There'd be more Bonner fans than Canisius fans probably. So I think that even though I understand what you're saying, specifically to this game, it is going to have an energetic feel because it's going to be a full gym and it's going to be a split crowd with probably about half Canisius fans, half Bonner fans, and there's going to be a lot of cheering back and forth and a lot of energy that's going to make this matchup more fun than if these two teams played at a bigger arena in a different context.
And you'll be at that game?
I'll be heading over there after the Sabres game. And then I like the opportunity to see St. Bonaventure, even though I do like watching games in the Riley Center and appreciate the atmosphere and the culture that they have down there. It's just always a little bit easier to see them without making that drive. And I do like when they come up here and play the local teams. Bonventure is playing all three of the local teams, UB, Canisius, and Niagara this year. The other three teams in various ways are not playing each other because UB is only playing Bonventure. Canisius and Niagara play each other again, but it's much later in the season. So I always like these little 3 Big Four games early in the season because one, you get to see both teams, you get that local rivalry fan energy that I come to appreciate. And from the media perspective, I mean, I'm going to write about the team that wins. I'm going to get a story out of this game. Whereas in a lot of these non-conference games, if the home team doesn't win, the storylines are different and it's less of a appealing game to cover.
St. Bonaventure coming off of its win over Cal State Northridge. It just took me probably 12 extra clicks on my computer to figure out who CSUN is. I mean, why can't these schools just tell me what they are? CSUN, that's their branding. I'm supposed to know what that is. I know what Cal State Northridge is.
Sounds like a conference.
Or just Northridge itself, but CSUN, I'm like, what is that? I mean, is it a local business? They have some like a slow pitch softball team they get together, CSUN. But Cal State Northridge, that's legit. St. Bonaventure beat them 70-56 on Monday. And Canisius again. What do you think about Canisius against Arizona? Was there anything to glean from that against going up against such a top program with history and pedigree and going on the road and the whole thing?
Not really. I mean, they got down 20-2 early and they lost by about 30 points, but that was right where the point spread was, and I think expected. Like I said on this podcast last week, that those games tell you a lot more about the home team and the higher ranked team. That if that game was a lot closer, I think you would have learned a lot more about Arizona than Canisius probably. And that I don't think you are at all disappointed or concerned about Canisius because they couldn't stay close with Arizona. Right. One thing I noticed, they did not shoot the ball well, and that might portend that Canisius is a bad shooting team. But I think from the practice I saw and talking with people around that program, I think shooting is going to be one of their strengths. So in a way, I don't think you learn much from that game because I think the one thing you could pull from the stat sheet is something that I don't know if it will extrapolate into league play and some of these other non-conference games when they play a different type of opponent.
I'm just trying to see do you know where that game was? I mean, is it one of those barns that it's tough to shoot because you're not used to it?
Perhaps, but I had a conversation with a college basketball player recently about how overrated that was and how, good shooters make shots anywhere. And, people play outside where there's no wall and endless space and they can still make shots. So I sometimes I think that's overstated.
Yeah, the game was at the McHale Center in front of 14,000 people. Well, pretty big crowd for Canisius to play in front of. 13,600 is the attendance. Yeah, all kinds of things with that. Travel, playing a different type of day. It would have been 10 or 11 o'clock at night, tip off with your body clock if you're from Canisius. Anything else you want to talk about with the colleges, Jonah?
Yeah, well, a game that I won't be able to attend tomorrow because I'll be over at Canisius, but I think it's a little bit of a big deal. The Buff State men's soccer team, they're ranked number 17 in the country in Division III, and they're hosting the SUNYAC championship game at 4 o'clock on their home field at Coyer Field, where the football team plays. And they have not won a SUNYAC title since 1970 when Randy Smith, the soon-to-be Buffalo Brave, was playing soccer for that team. They have not played in the SUNYAC final since 1984. So, 40 years since they've been in this position, and it's been a kind of a dream season for them. They have reached the NCAA tournament in 2017 and a few times in the early 80s, but that's about it. I do think with their ranking, maybe they're in the tournament either way, but an opportunity for this team to do something that the program hasn't done in more than 50 years and do it on their home field, I think is interesting for people in Western New York that appreciate the game of soccer.
People may not be listening to this podcast until after the Friday night football has begun, given the timing here, as we're recording Friday late afternoon. So let's skip tonight's matchups. But I know that you and Nick Veronica at WIVB Channel 4 are doing a closer look at next week's championship games. What can you tell us about that?
This is semifinal weekend, and that's going to lead into the games out of Highmark Stadium. Thursday, there's 3 games. Friday, there's 2 more games. And then Nick and I are taping a web show in the middle of the week that's probably going to go online Thursday morning. It's a little bit of a first of its kind type thing that we're doing at WIVB.com, breaking down the matchups and talking a little bit about what fans can expect. And I think it's going to be interesting for people that appreciate high school football here, and there's some exciting visual elements we're hoping are on there. So, that doesn't get a huge attendance figure out at the stadium. It isn't quite like the basketball games where a lot of people kind of just show up to watch a day of basketball. Most of the crowd is friends and family and students related to the teams, and then they leave and the new crowd comes in. Even some of the schools like Salamanca that are further away tend to bring larger crowds that come in buses. But if you like high school football, you're going to have an opportunity to see a lot of good teams play against each other over a 2-day span. And the Catholic League playoffs get started next week with some semifinal games leading into their championship game a week later that I think is going to be at that same Buff State field where they're playing soccer tomorrow. And the Catholic State Championship game is going to be in Western New York a week or 2 after that with whatever team, whether it's St. Francis, Canisius, St. Joe's, or Timon, whoever wins that tournament is going to be playing on their home field for a state championship later on in this month.
All right, Jonah, good stuff. And stick with us through this break. Come back and you'll see Joe Andreessen get his first look at a rookie football card and his reaction to it. Please.
I think we might be the only podcast in America this week that didn't reference the presidential election. Every other podcast.
Now you just ruined it.
Well, Easter egg for people to listen all the way.
Way to go, Jonah. Could be, unrelated. You can follow me on Blue Sky at by Tim Graham. In addition to Twitter, I've been on Blue Sky a lot more. And this goes back a few weeks, especially on Twitter. When it comes to Bills stuff during a game, there was just too much chatter. Same with any sporting event. It's not just Bills, but when you follow, in my mind, I'm looking at it from a reader or a consumer standpoint. You're a Bills fan. If you follow me for Bills, you're probably following 20 people for Bills, maybe more. And when something happens in a game, you don't need to see 20 different tweets saying the same thing about so-and-so going to the medical tent or replay seems to show XYZ. So I'd stop doing that, and I'd stop doing it for years. My thought being, well, I'll save everything for my column. Why would I want to just give it all out on Twitter anyway? And so maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I don't know if it was the Titans game or it was definitely in Seattle. I started doing what I used to do, live tweeting, but on Blue Sky. And I was given my thoughts, and it felt good because there aren't a lot of Bills people there. There aren't a lot of people haven't made the move over. And so it just kind of felt good to be interactive, and not many people saw. I only have 1,000 followers over there, but the interaction that I was getting back from people who do follow me on Blue Sky was quite rewarding. And so this hasn't, again, I said it tongue in cheek but it has been a bit unrelated about the election. And, there's just so much happening on Twitter that is what we used to make fun of Facebook about, right? And Twitter has just become this place where it's hard to go there and check your news feed without somebody, saying something that's, just makes you want to turn it off. So anyways, I'm over at Blue Sky and I've been live tweeting or live, whatever they call it at Blue Sky, live posting Bills stuff. I've been sharing more of my thoughts because they don't get lost in the stew of all the Bills stuff that's out there. So it's just been a way to differentiate my coverage a little bit. So feel free to check me out over at, sign up for an account. I did notice a lot of new members, a lot of new Blue Sky members this week, a lot more people signing up for my account, people who I would like to follow, who I followed back. So there has been a bit of a migration there.
You did need to be on Twitter to learn, at least before a few days later, about the Swanee house, though. That
That's
news was
right.
broken.
I'm not going to leave Twitter. I don't think I can because it's my news feed. Unless Blue Sky gets to the point where there are a lot of accounts that I like to follow that aren't on Blue Sky, and I'm talking about national. I don't even know if the Athletic is on Blue Sky yet. A lot of writers I like to follow, whether it be sports or world news or collectibles or memorabilia. There's all kinds of stuff. Comedians. So it's still, I'm still going to keep going to Twitter to check, get the pulse. What are people talking about? What are, the different news things, the Swanee house closing. That's not I mean, people have taken these hard, the old Pink burning down. Of course, that was a fire. That's, it's a tragedy to lose a building, somebody to lose their business that way. It was more of an eye roll with the candlelight vigils and things like that of the old Pink. And I mean, I get it. I mean, and everybody knows I'm a bar guy. I mean, I like my bars. I like my social activity at the bar. I like being at bars. I like the vibe of it. I like the camaraderie. I like watching sports there and busting balls and doing all the things that you do there. The social aspect of it. It's more important to me than the drinking. But the Swanee, it's tough, but it's not like I was in a funk about it. Do you think that there's a bar that you would lose, or what's a type of place that you would lose, Jonah, where you'd be particularly upset?
I'd be pretty disappointed if we lost Elmo's. But I think what hurts a lot of people about the Swanee house and the old Pink in situations like this is the suddenness of it, which is what often happens.
Yes, there was no going away for the Swanee. It just closed its doors. Right. I mean, and plus there are people who work there that are not. I mean, I think that people would have liked the opportunity to say goodbye in their way, but also to, fatten the tip jar a little bit for some of the people who are going to be on their way after years and years of working, decades of working there. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And I mean, sadly, that's what often happens with people in our lives. We don't always get warned when death is coming or things like that. Maybe it's worse sometimes when we do know it's coming, but I think with bars and establishments like that, when you're able to have kind of a longer period of mourning and a going away period, it makes it a little bit easier. With the Swanee house compared to the Pink, I mean, somebody could buy the building and reopen a bar and it won't be exactly the same, but it'll be close and could have a lot of the same, cultural feeling with different ownership and perhaps a different name. The old Pink burning down and never having that same floor and that same grill and that same everything that was made that place what it was, I think
the urinals.
Exactly. I mean, the charm that place had can't be replicated with a new building built on the same land. So that's a lot different. I do think somebody's probably going to put a bar into the Swanee house and preserve some of that history in some way, but you never know. I mean, I think that the Buffalo preservationists are probably going to get involved and make sure that building doesn't get torn down and turned into an apartment or something like that.
Yeah. If anybody listening, if you've made it this far and you know, like I should know as much time as I spent there and the people that I know, I should maybe reach out, but I would like a couple of things off the wall in that place. Especially the Jimmy Slattery photo that's behind the bar, the famous, Buffalo boxer, the light heavyweight champion back in the roaring 20s. There's a cool photo behind the bar of Jimmy Slattery. I'd like to have that if anybody, has, the wherewithal to pull that off. There's a couple other things hanging around. There's a column that was written once, I think by Mike Zeisberg. I don't know if Zeisberger wrote it, but it's a column about hockey writers going into the Swanee House, and Jim Kelly is prominently written about in it, and it's attached to the wall. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I'd like to have a couple of things. I'm sure I'm not alone. All right. Please subscribe to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Please subscribe, give it the thumbs up, like it, comment, do all the things. We're going to take a break, but then we're going to come back and we're going to be flies on the wall as Joe Andreessen gets to see his first football card for the first time in his life. Pretty cool. Pretty cool that I had an opportunity to play a small part in it. But that's coming up right after this here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants.
The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.
I'm Bucky Gleason, and you're listening to Tim Graham and Friends. Tim Graham has friends?
Okay, thanks for sticking around to take a look at this big rookie card reveal for Joe Andreessen. Let me set it up. Let me set this video up. This was done Wednesday evening with the help of Tracy Hackler, senior brand manager at Panini America, who made it a point to get the images of these cards for Joe Andreessen. And it's cards plural because there are 3 different versions of this rookie card. One of them sells for $9.99. There is a limited edition of 5 for $29.99, and then a 1 of 1 for $99.99. And we took a look at each one, and Joe Andreessen had never seen these before. You'll also see a third person on this video. That is Kevin Kearns from the Buffalo Bills PR department. He was the one who coordinated the Zoom, and so you'll see him on here. His thanks for making this happen. My intention was to hopefully show Joe Andreessen these cards personally, but they were online only at the time. They won't be printed for another couple weeks. And he was already out of the facility by the time that I got these in my possession. And also probably with me being a little under the weather, let's not put some Bills players on the injury report with illnesses. So I was not out at the facility this week. So we are going to see Joe Andreessen, card collector, Lancaster High alum, University at Buffalo alum, and one of the great stories in the NFL, the entire NFL this year, not just in Buffalo, getting a first look at his rookie card. Let me show the tweet, though, real quick, so that for posterity. Here is the tweet that Joe sent out after the Seattle Seahawks game, asking Panini America where his rookie card is. And then this is what happened.
All right, Tim, I think I got this figured out. So you want
Okay.
the rookie base front?
Rookie base front. Well, how about this? Let's build the drama a little bit. Let's show him the back first, just to tease it a little bit, so that way you know this card does exist, and then we'll reveal the photo, if that's all right. Perfect. I don't know if this is the smart way to do it or not, Joe, but I'm having fun with this.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm gonna read it.
Yeah, read it out loud.
Yeah, okay. Days after helping Buffalo beat Seattle, Andreessen posted on social media, "Hey Panini America, still waiting for you to make me a rookie card. For the hardworking hometown kid who made the cut as an undrafted free agent, here's a commemorative collectible for you and all of Bills Mafia." I'm excited right now. Like, yes.
All right. Kev, you get to be the Bob Barker here and
All right.
reveal the.
I'm just trying to make sure I properly man the technology here.
Yeah, just tell me what's going through your mind.
Oh, that's awesome. Asking you, so I love that. I mean, I'm just like excited, and I mean, I've been talking to my family and like my girlfriend and everything because they obviously know I collect cards and everything like that. So I'm excited. That's an awesome picture too. And I got to get the 101. That's like really what's going through my mind. Bounty out for the 101.
All right, well, hang on. Let's stay on this one for a little bit. So you know that play, obviously. That's right after your big tackle, right?
Yeah. Sure.
What are your thoughts that's your first, this is your rookie card. This is the first card that will ever be made. There's never going to be another first, and that's the picture. How's it hit you?
I mean, I got a lot of love from a lot of people for that tackle. So, I mean, I think it's a great moment, and just that this card represents that is awesome. And, hopefully there's many more plays to come down the line. So
one thing that comes to mind as a collector when I see this card, there's a lot of white on there, which makes it this is going to be a great autograph card.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
What do you think it'll be like? Well, maybe a fan won't be the first one to hand it to you. Maybe it's a family member.
Yeah.
But what do you think that's going to be like when you get to start signing your own card and not a piece of paper?
I mean, that's going to be awesome. I mean, just like we talked about earlier before, I guess we started recording, but just I grew up collecting and being that little kid that, wanted cards of my favorite players and, autographs of my favorite players. Just to give it back, it's going to be cool.
Do you sign your name with 44?
I do. Yes.
That's the other thing. You don't need to with this card.
Yeah, no, I don't. And I like the white borders a lot too, because it's good card to grade when they're white borders.
That's right. And the white, so you can sign this in blue. You could sign this in any color too. So there are all kinds of versions. You can make your own exclusives with this. Hey, do you double check to make sure that they've spelled your name right and everything?
Ooh, I should. Yeah, they did. My mom would never stop talking about that if they did.
Anything else that I didn't ask you about with this? I mean, before we take a look at the next one.
No, I'm just happy because I mean, I guess just to talk about it a little bit more. If you don't collect, I guess you don't know, but obviously a lot of in the football collecting realm, the QBs obviously hold the most value, and the offensive guys are below that in the specialty positions like wide receivers, running backs. So if you're not a first round pick or notable draft pick, a lot of guys in the NFL don't get cards just because their cards don't hold value. So Panini, who has the license right now, isn't gonna spend their time making it. So that's kind of even why I tweeted it out, and because I really wanted one, and kind of just being in my position, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get one. So I mean, just excited to be in this position.
These go for $9.99. If you're curious,
I'm going to be buying. Deal.
Okay, so these next ones go for these are $30, $29.99. So this would be the one that's white tiger. This is one of 5.
A white tiger.
Yeah, there's only 5 of these. So you got to jump on this.
Okay.
Other thing too is you don't this one of one. You might not be able to get your own. So this is a white tiger.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And I don't think the back. I didn't check the back, but I think the back stay the same, Joe.
And it says 1 out of 5 on the back.
Yes. There's a spot on the bottom of the card. And then this one's pretty cool. So this one's called Viper, and this is 1 of 1 for $100.
Okay. That's awesome.
It's not coming through necessarily. I think it's more like a greenish than a. It's kind of like a bright teal.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love that it says asking you shall receive too.